How you doing, everyone? Welcome back. Well, Steve Bannon. Yeah, Steve Bannon, that guy. The guy that always wears way too many shirts, and he's got a scabbed up face, and, very, very Trumpian Trump acolyte. The guy who says that Trump will have a third term, and that he's already working on that. This guy also says that the Catholic Conclave, wherein the new Pope was selected, the first one from the United States of America, from Chicago, Pope Leo XIV. I don't remember his name before becoming Pope. But yeah, Pope Leo XIV. Well, Pope Leo XIV had a few things to say about what's written in this book. Holy Bible. This is a King James version. Right? And honestly, I don't read that book as often as I should. I do consider myself a Christian. I am not a Catholic, and therefore the new Pope doesn't really mean much to me, right? But it does mean something to about 1 billion people around the world, right? And you know what? I'm not going to sit here and disrespect the Catholics. I'm going to sit here and disagree with them, but not disrespect them. We just have different opinions on religious practices. And I don't really practice a religion per se. I don't really care much for organized religion, but I do love the book, right, and what's written in it. But Steve Bannon said that the conclave to elect Pope Leo XIV was rigged. Actually, he very specifically said it was more rigged than the 2020 election. Okay, well, that's believable because the 2020 election wasn't rigged at all. But I also don't believe that the Catholic Conclave was rigged. I mean, the cardinals get behind closed doors and they vote on the Pope. And don't really care what goes on behind those closed doors. They choose the Pope based on whatever criteria they use. Right? But Steve Bannon says that they intentionally chose an anti-Trump Pope. Well, hate to tell you, but this is anti-Trump in a lot of ways, right? Anti-Trump. In Sermon on the Mount, in the book of Matthew, which is chapters 5 through 7. I don't remember the chapter and verse exactly. I actually just read it before coming out here. But gather not for yourself treasures on earth, which the moths will eat and rust will destroy, or I don't remember the exact wording, but it's to that effect, right? Instead, gather for yourselves the treasures in heaven. And we, humanity, ignore that. We like to ignore that. And that's all of us. It's not just Donald Trump. He is one of the most egregious offenders, of course. But I think pretty much every human being ignores that part to one degree or another. But, there's also parts in there about feeding the hungry. Well, trying to get rid of what? SNAP, which is better known as food stamps. Caring for the sick. Meanwhile, we're getting rid of, not getting rid of, but cutting back severely on and wanting to get rid of Medicare and Medicaid, specifically Medicaid. The meek shall inherit the earth. Somebody who is loud and brash and boastful is not meek. Therefore will not inherit the earth. So if you want to say that the Pope is anti-Trump, I'm going to say that if he's following the book, he should be. If he's following the book, he should be anti-Trump. And Donald Trump, who claims to be a Christian, and, says that says that his own book, The Art of the Deal, is his second favorite only to this, which there's no evidence that he's ever read it. He can't even, he cited one verse one time. And that was the Old Testament verse, an eye for an eye. I don't have it memorized exactly what it says, but you know how it goes. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And while it was actually Gandhi who said it, Jesus actually brought about the idea of an eye for an eye makes the world go blind. Jesus is the one who said, if someone slaps your cheek, turn the other one and allow them to slap that one as well. If someone forces you to go a mile, go 2. Those are the teachings of Jesus. There are words in this book that are written in red letters. Red letters. And that's, here in the New Testament, which would be the book of Matthew, which would have, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face. Do not appear to fast. Basically don't contort your face and pretend that it's, that you're in discomfort. Don't give the appearance of discomfort because, you're showing other people and you've already received your reward. So that's from Mark, that's from Matthew. And then in Mark is where the Sermon on the Mount is, and I gave you some of that as well. And in Luke, they're and why beholdest thou, again, this is King James Version, why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but perceivest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Which basically, that also translates to, it's more commonly known as the speck in your in your brother's eye while you have a plank in your own eye or a log in your own eye. Remove the plank or the log from your own eye and then help your brother with the speck in his. You know. So, I didn't come out here to actually give a Bible lesson, but, to say that the Catholic Conclave was rigged so that we would have an anti-Trump American Pope. I mean, if you're following the book, if the Pope is following the book, he's going to be anti-Trump in many, many ways. Also, not everything is about Donald Trump. Not everything is about him. Maybe the Pope isn't anti-Trump so much as he is pro-Jesus. You ever stop to consider that? Pick up that book. Read any parts written in red. Any parts written in red. People like to point out, the Old Testament, Leviticus in particular, but things in, Genesis and Exodus, and other Old Testament books. They like to go back to that while ignoring the New Testament. They call themselves Christians while ignoring the New Testament, which is the part where Jesus is located. That's the part where he teaches. And, you might want to look at that part if you're going to call yourself a Christian. So, the Pope was not selected because of Donald Trump. He was not selected as an anti-Trump Pope. He was not selected to be a pro-Trump Pope. The Catholic churches should not be either pro or anti-Donald Trump. They should be pro-Jesus. Every Christian church should be pro-Jesus. That's it. That should be the only criteria. And if that just so happens to go against Donald Trump, so be it. Like I said, I am not Catholic. The new Pope doesn't really mean a whole lot to me, personally, just because I'm not Catholic. And again, no disrespect to Catholics, just disagreement with them. They have a lot of church doctrine that I think is more man-made than it is biblical, as I see it. Right? But again, that's no disrespect to them, it's just disagreement with them. And, I know a lot of good people who are Catholics, a lot of good Christians who are Catholics. We just disagree with how that faith should be practiced. So, anyway, anti-Trump Pope, he's following the Bible, yeah. Catch you next time.